You ever sit in a room full of people who are smiling at you, shaking your hand, and calling you boss, but you just know in your gut that the second you turn your back, they're sharpening the knives? That was my life every single day as the CEO of Vanguard Dynamics, and honestly, I thought I had it all figured out. I thought I was the smartest person in the room, until the day I realized the man emptying my trash can was actually the most dangerous weapon in the building. My name is Ellen Vance, and at 28, I was running one of the biggest defense contractors in Seattle, a company my father built from a garage startup into a global empire. But when he died in that accidental helicopter crash over the Pacific, he didn't just leave me a legacy, he left me a time bomb ticking in his will. The lawyers sat me down in this mahogany-paneled room that smelled like old money and bad news, and they dropped the hammer, a clause my father had added 3 weeks before he died, stating that I had to be legally married within 30 days of his passing, or the controlling interest in the company would revert to the board of directors. I remember laughing at first because it sounded like a joke, like some archaic plot from a Victorian novel, but when I saw the smirk on the face of Silas Sterling, the chairman of the board and my father's so-called best friend, I knew it was real. Silas had been circling my position like a shark since the funeral, waiting for me to slip. And this was his play. He knew I was married to my job. He knew I didn't have a personal life, and he figured I'd never find someone I could trust. In a month, forcing me to forfeit the company. So I did what any desperate, cornered executive would do. I treated it like a procurement problem. I ran background checks on suitors. I interviewed VPs. I looked at male models. But everyone had an angle. Everyone wanted a piece of the pie or a seat on the board. And I needed a ghost, someone who would sign the paper, take the stipend, and disappear into the background. That's how I ended up at the Rusty Anchor, a dive bar about 10 miles past the acceptable side of town, nursing a whiskey and feeling sorry for myself, trying to escape the suffocation of my own life. I was 3 drinks in, head buzzing, when this guy sat 2 stools down. He wasn't trying to pick me up, wasn't looking at the TV. He was just sitting there with a stillness that was almost unnatural, nursing a club soda like it was holy water. He was wearing gray coveralls with a Vanguard maintenance patch on the chest. My company, and I recognized him vaguely as the guy who buffed the floors on the executive level, the one I walked past every morning without even nodding, just part of the furniture. His name tag said Caleb, and he looked tired, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix, with scuffed boots and hands that looked rougher than sandpaper. I was about to leave when this drunk guy next to me, some loudmouth who wouldn't take a hint, grabbed my wrist hard, trying to force me to dance. And before I could even scream, the world just tilted. I didn't see Caleb move. That's the thing that haunts me. I just felt the wind of him, and suddenly the drunk guy was on his knees, wincing in pain. His arm twisted at an angle that looked biologically impossible, but hadn't actually broken anything. Caleb hadn't even spilled his club soda. He just leaned down and whispered something to the guy. I couldn't hear it, but the guy turned pale, mumbled an apology, and ran out the door like the devil was chasing him. Caleb sat back down, took a sip of his drink, and looked at me with eyes that were too old for his face, eyes that had seen things I couldn't even imagine. "You okay, Ms. Vance?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly, like tires on a gravel road. "You know who I am?" I asked, rubbing my wrist. "I clean your office," he said simply. Hard to miss the boss. That was the moment the idea hit me, desperate and crazy, but brilliant in its simplicity. Here was a guy who worked for minimum wage, a guy who clearly knew how to handle himself but had zero ambition, zero connections, a man who was literally invisible to the people trying to steal my company. I made him the offer right there in the bar, laying it out like a business deal. 1 year of marriage, a monthly allowance that probably looked like a lottery win to him, and a clean divorce at the end, no questions asked. He looked at me for a long time, studying me like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. And then he asked the one thing I didn't expect. "Do I have to attend the board meetings?" "No," I said. "You just have to stand next to me and look married." "Done," he said, shaking my hand with a grip that was dry, firm, and surprisingly gentle. We got married 3 days later at the courthouse. Me in a white dress I bought off the rack, and him in a suit I paid for. And when we walked into the boardroom, the next Monday to introduce my husband, the silence was so thick you could choke on it. Silas Sterling looked like he'd swallowed a lemon, his eyes darting from me to Caleb, trying to figure out the angle, but all he saw was a janitor who looked uncomfortable in a tie. Love moves fast, I told the board with a fake smile, clutching Caleb's arm. Caleb is the strong, silent type. We moved him into my penthouse to keep up appearances, but it was strictly business. He took the guest room, I took the master, and we lived these parallel lives where I ran the company and he kept working. That was the weirdest part. I told him he could quit, told him to just play video games or whatever, but he insisted on keeping his job, saying he needed the routine. So by day he was Mr. Ellenavance, and by night he was pushing a mop bucket through the R&D labs. But things started to get strange, little details that didn't add up. I'd come home late, exhausted, and find dinner made not just food, but nutritious, perfectly balanced meals plated with precision. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. to get a glass of water and find him in the living room doing handstand push-ups, his body moving with a control that was terrifying to watch, muscles rippling under his t-shirt like steel cables. One night, about 2 months in, I came home and found him fixing the security system on the balcony doors. He had the panel open and was rewiring it with a speed and dexterity that no janitor should have. "What are you doing?" I asked, startled. The latency was too high. He said without looking up, "If someone breached the perimeter, you'd have a 3-second delay before the alarm tripped. I fixed it. Now it's instant." "Where did you learn to bypass a military-grade alarm system, Caleb?" I asked, crossing my arms, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the AC. He stood up, wiping his hands on a rag, and gave me that same unreadable look. "YouTube," he said, flatly. "You can learn anything on the internet, Elena." I wanted to push him. I wanted to scream that he was lying, but I was too tired, and frankly, part of me felt safer knowing he was there, which was a dangerous feeling, because I had spent my whole life believing I didn't need anyone. The masquerade came crashing down on the night of the Vanguard Gala, the biggest event of the year, where we were unveiling our new drone defense system. I was in a blue silk gown, working the room, smiling at generals and senators, while Caleb stood by the bar in a tuxedo, looking surprisingly elegant, watching the room not like a guest, but like a hawk scanning for field mice. I was in the middle of a conversation with a senator when the power cut out just for a second, and the emergency lights flickered, casting the ballroom in eerie red shadows. Confusion rippled through the crowd, but before I could call security, 3 men in waiter uniforms pulled MP5 submachine guns from under their serving trays. People screamed, dropping to the floor. Chaos erupted, and one of the gunmen locked eyes with me. Raising his weapon, I froze, my brain refusing to process that I was about to die. The muzzle flashed looking like a camera bulb in slow motion, but the bullet never hit me. Caleb was there. He didn't run. He flowed, moving faster than thought, sliding across the polished floor and tackling the gunman with a brutality that was sickeningly efficient. He snapped the man's arm, took the weapon, rolled to his feet, and put two controlled bursts into the other two attackers across the room. Pop, 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 dropping them before they could pull their triggers. The whole thing took maybe 6 seconds. Silence fell over the room, heavier than before, broken only by the whimpering of the guests. Caleb stood there, holding the submachine gun with a familiarity that chilled me to the bone, his eyes scanning the exits, his posture perfect, his breathing rhythmic and calm. He wasn't a janitor. He wasn't my husband. He was a soldier. Security swarmed in a moment later, and Caleb dropped the magazine, cleared the chamber, and placed the weapon on the floor with 2 fingers, surrendering instantly, his face a mask of indifference. I dragged him out of there before the police could separate us, shoving him into the back of my limo, my hands shaking so bad I couldn't pour a drink. We rode in silence until we got back to the penthouse, where I finally exploded. "Who are you?" I screamed, throwing my purse at him. "Don't give me the janitor crap, Caleb." Janitors don't neutralize hit squads in 6 seconds. Who the hell are you? He walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle rain, and for the first time, his shoulders slumped, the weight of the lie finally too heavy to carry. He pulled off his tie, unbuttoned his shirt, and turned to show me his back. It was a map of scars, burn marks, shrapnel wounds, the history of violence written on his skin. "My name is Caleb Thornton," he said quietly, "former commander of Obsidian Echo. It's a unit that doesn't officially exist. We did the jobs the SEALs wouldn't touch, and the CIA denied knowing about." I sat down on the sofa, the air leaving my lungs. Obsidian Echo. I've heard rumors. The ghost unit. But why? Why are you mopping my floors? Why did you marry me? "Because your father asked me to," he said, and that was the second bomb. Arthur Vance contacted me 6 months ago. He knew someone on his board was selling tech to foreign adversaries. He knew they were going to kill him. He tried to get proof, but he ran out of time. He sent me a package with a failsafe, protect his daughter, and find the rat. So this, I gestured between us, feeling tears stinging my eyes. This marriage. It was just a mission. I'm just an assignment. He looked at me then, and the mask cracked, showing a flash of pain that stopped my heart. It started as a mission, Elena. It started as a way to get close enough to watch your back without alerting the enemy. But somewhere between the late-night teas and watching you fight for this company with everything you have, it stopped being a job. You lied to me every day, I whispered. I kept you alive. He countered, stepping closer. And we're not done. That hit tonight wasn't random. It was a panic move. Whoever is pulling the strings knows we're getting close. They tried to take you off the board because you're the only thing standing in their way. It's Silas, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Silas Sterling. He pushed for the marriage clause. He tried to force me out. He's the only one with the access codes to bypass the gala security. Caleb nodded grimly. That's my assessment too. But we can't just accuse him. He owns the police. He owns the judges. We need hard proof. We need to catch him with his hand in the cookie jar. And how do we do that? I asked, wiping my face, feeling the fear turn into a cold, hard rage. We stopped playing defense. Caleb said, a dangerous smile touching his lips. We go back to the office tonight. While everyone is distracted by the shooting, we break into the secure server farm in the basement, the one I've been cleaning for 3 months. And we steal the transaction logs. Break into my own company? I asked, a hysterical laugh bubbling up. Technically, he said, pulling a black tactical bag from under the couch that I didn't even know was there. It's breaking and entering if I do it. If you do it, it's just aggressive auditing. We drove back to the Vanguard Tower at 2 a.m., the streets slick with rain. I used my executive override to get us into the garage, but the building was already in lockdown mode. Silas must have anticipated a counter move. The elevators were cut. Stairs, Caleb said, handing me a flashlight. 30 floors, you ready? I do cardio, I muttered, hiking up my gala dress. We made it to the server level, but the corridor was guarded not by regular security, but by mercenaries. Guys wearing gear that looked suspiciously like what Caleb had in his bag. Stay here, Caleb whispered, pushing me into a supply closet. Count to 20, then run for the server room door. Caleb, there's 4 of them, I hissed. I know, he said, checking the slide on a pistol he had materialized from somewhere. It's not a fair fight. They should have brought more guys. He slipped out into the hallway, and I started counting. 1, 2, 3, I heard a shout. Then the distinct thwack-thwack of suppressed gunfire, the sound of bodies hitting the floor, the grunt of exertion. 12, 13, silence. I burst out of the closet at 20. The hallway was a mess. 4 mercenaries down, zip-tied and unconscious. Caleb was standing by the server room door, hacking the keypad with a device that looked like a smartphone. On steroids, you're terrifying, I told him as we ran inside. I'm efficient, he corrected. The server room was freezing, rows of blue lights blinking in the dark. I navigated to the main terminal. This was my world now. I knew the architecture. I started querying the hidden partitions, the shadow drives my father used to talk about. Come on, I muttered, typing furiously. Where are you hiding? Silas Elena, Caleb said, his voice tight. We have company. The cameras just went dead. That means a kill team is coming. I need 5 minutes. You have to. I drove straight to the federal building, ignoring red lights, my hands slick on the steering wheel, the flash drive burning a hole in my pocket. I met Special Agent Miller in the lobby, a man my father had trusted, and handed over the drive with shaking hands. I told him everything. The marriage, the hit squad, Silas, the server room. We'll get a team there, Miller said, looking at the data on his tablet with widening eyes. This is treason, Ms. Vance. This brings the whole house down. I don't care about the house. I snapped, soot staining my gala dress. My husband is still in there. You get him out. By the time the FBI SWAT team breached the Vanguard Tower, the fire was under control, but the server floor was a war zone. I waited by the ambulance barricade, shivering under a foil blanket, watching every stretcher that came out, my heart stopping every time. They brought out bodies in bags, mercenaries, then Silas's men, and then, finally, 2 agents walked out supporting a man who was limping, covered in drywall dust and blood, but walking on his own 2 feet, Caleb. I broke through the police line, sprinting toward him. He looked up, one eye swollen shut, his maintenance coveralls shredded, and managed a crooked, painful smile. Hey, boss, he wheezed. I think I'm gonna need a sick day. I collided with him, burying my face in his chest, not caring about the blood or the smell of smoke. You idiot, I sobbed. You stupid, heroic idiot. Did you get the drive? He whispered into my hair. I got it. Silas is finished. Good, he said. And then his legs finally gave out, and he collapsed into my arms. The next few weeks were a blur of legal depositions, hospital visits, and media storms. Silas Sterling was arrested at his private airfield trying to flee the country. The footage of him being led away in handcuffs was played on every news channel in America. The board of directors was purged. The stock tanked, then rallied as the truth came out about the hero CEO and her husband who saved the company. Caleb was in the hospital for 3 weeks. Broken ribs, gunshot wound to the shoulder, concussion, burns. I moved my office into his hospital room, working from a laptop while he slept, refusing to leave his side dot when he finally woke up properly. Really woke up without the morphine haze. It was raining again, that soft Seattle drizzle. So, he said, looking at the flowers piling up in the corner. The contract is almost up. I looked up from my spreadsheet. What? The marriage contract, he said, staring at the ceiling. We accomplished the mission. You have the company. The threat is neutralized. You can annul the marriage. Go back to your life. You don't need a janitor dragging down your approval ratings. I closed my laptop and walked over to the bed, sitting on the edge. I looked at this man, this warrior who had scrubbed toilets to watch over me, who had taken a bullet for me, who had eaten a sandwich I gave him 10 years ago when he was starving. He told me that story. In the ambulance. A fever dream confession that broke me apart and put me back together. You're right, I said. I don't need a janitor. His face fell, just a fraction. He started to nod, accepting his fate like a soldier accepting orders. But I continued, reaching out to trace the scar on his jawline. I do need a director of security. And I definitely need a husband who knows how to cook, because I burn toast. He looked at me, confusion warring with hope. Elena, I'm a grunt. I'm not. I don't fit in your world. Then we build a new world, I said fiercely. My father didn't choose you because you were a weapon, Caleb. He chose you because you were the only man he knew who had honor. He knew you wouldn't sell me out. And he was right. I pulled a file from my bag. This is the annulment paper. I tore it in half, then in half again, letting the pieces flutter to the floor. I'm extending the contract, I said, leaning down until our foreheads touched. Indefinitely, no salary, but the benefits are pretty good. Caleb let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. He reached up with his good hand, tangling his fingers in my hair, pulling me down for a kiss that tasted like antiseptic and absolute, terrifying love. Copy that, he whispered. 6 months later, The rebranding of Vanguard was complete. We launched the Phoenix Initiative, a division dedicated to defensive tech with oversight protocols. That made it impossible for one person to compromise the system again. We donated millions to Veteran Support Network's Caleb's idea. We had a second wedding, a real one, small, in the garden of a house we bought outside the city, far away from the penthouse. No press, just a few people we trusted. Caleb wore a suit that fit him perfectly, and when he said "I do," he didn't look at the ground, and he didn't scan the perimeter. He looked at me. But here's the thing that sticks with me. The question I want to leave you guys with. My father manipulated us. He orchestrated this whole thing: the will, the threat, the hiring of Caleb. He treated his own daughter and a traumatized soldier like chess pieces to save his legacy. It worked. We're happy. The company is safe. But was it right? Does the end justify the means when you're playing with people's lives? Caleb says yes. He says in war, you do what you have to do to save the mission. But I look at his scars, and I look at the gray hairs I earned this year, and I wonder if there was a better way. Can you build a foundation of trust on a blueprint of lies? We made it work, but we're the exceptions. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. Would you forgive a parent who did that to you? Or would you take the money and run? Let me know. I'm Alan Thorne, and thanks for listening to our story.